As we know, research is very important, and there's two purposes for research assignments, either to explore or to argue. To explore, you pose the question because you're unsure of the answer. And to argue, you know that you have a lot to learn about your topic, but you have a very strong hunch about what the answer to your research or question might be. You have a hypothesis that you want to test. And so in both cases, we need to explore or argue, and then we need to find our research. And there's different ways in which we can go about that. So let's talk about some of those and kind of break it down. So of course, there's Google versus library databases. Yes, Google is more than likely the first place that you want to go when beginning a search online. Or if there's another search engine that you use, your go-to, you'll go there first. But the library databases can be just as helpful. In academic writing, however, you will need to find more reliable scholarly articles specific to your topic from actual experts. And you will find those types of sources within the library databases more than on Google. So how do you distinguish then the sources from each other? And how do we figure out if they're good sources? So there's a few different things in how we can break that down. Are they primary or secondary sources? Are they objective or subjective? Are they stable or unstable? So first, looking at primary versus secondary. Primary represents the original words of a writer, his speech, poem, eyewitness account, letter, interview, or autobiography. Secondary analyzes somebody else's work. So we always want to try to look for a primary source versus a secondary source. Of course, secondary sources can be okay, but a primary is going to be better. Objective versus subjective. So objective is reporting the facts, and then subjective is giving an opinion. Of course, depending on the type of paper that we are writing, when we're doing our research, we want to try most of the time to have objective, reporting facts. That one is going to be better. Sometimes we do put in our opinion, and so then that would be subjective. But overall, when we're looking for sources, we want to look for facts that are going to help back us up in that research that we're doing and help build that paper. So objective will usually be best. Stable versus unstable. Stable, of course, there is a credible author, the source is current, it is reputable, so it's attached to an actual organization or a well-known group. Of course, that's what we're always looking for. We don't want something that's unstable, where basically that has no author, the source isn't current on its date, and then maybe there's no affiliation of any type of particular group or organization giving it credibility. If we find a source that has no name, no author, no date, and no organization, is just randomly out there, then we're going to question that source. And so it's going to be unstable versus something that's credible with an author's name, at least a group that is attached to it, that can give some kind of reputable background to it. Then we're also looking for, when we're looking at sources, obviously looking for ones that have authors, we want to look for sources that have often cited authors. So if you see a reoccurring author's name on various sources that you find, then it's likely that they are very knowledgeable in the field, and they are probably well-known expert in the field as well. We want to try to find experts in the field as the authors behind this research that we're finding. That is obviously going to be a more stable, reliable source. What about books? Yes, books can still be great sources, but there are a few things that you want to consider before using any book as a source. Is the book written for a general audience or more knowledgeable readers? So that's something that you want to think about. Is it something that any random person's going to be able to pick up and understand? Or does it seem to be more knowledgeable readers, so maybe someone more in that experted field? That might depend on what you're doing. You want to try to find experts in the field and find someone that can actually give some reliable information. So sometimes a general audience as the background audience for a book may not be as good of a book as it would be if it had knowledgeable, uh, going toward knowledgeable readers, which would be, for example, if you pick up a book on psychology and it is by a doctor that has been a psychiatrist for 20 years, that's going to be a more knowledgeable expert, and then probably based more on information that would be more in the field of psychology. Is the author an acknowledged expert in the field? So that's something that you could do a little pre-research on too. Maybe look up about the author and see, have they been around for a long period of time? Are they an expert? What do they know, or what can they tell you about this? Is there a bibliography? So is there information that they're talking about carefully documented? Do they list their sources on where they got this information? And then how was the book received by critics? So that's something that you want to think about too. So for example, going back to a psychology book, if you had a book on psychology and it was written by an expert that's been around for 20 years, what are other psychologists saying about it? Like, yeah, as far as like critics, are they writing about it and saying that it's a very resourceful, it's very knowledgeable, it's very up to date and current? What are they saying? If you find good uh, critics, good reviews on the book, then you know that's probably going to be a good source as well. Of course, there's things that you want to think about when evaluating online sources too. Always keep your purpose in mind. You want to favor governmental and educational sources over commercial ones. A commercial being more like .com or .net at the end. Favor authored documents over those without authors. This does change a little bit though when it comes to government related. A lot of the time government related websites, they have multiple people within the organization that work on them, so they don't necessarily always have author names. But when it's government, so .gov, then it's trusted, so you can be more willing to use that if they don't have an author listed. But if you you don't want to favor basically .coms that don't have authors. Favor websites that have been recently updated over those that haven't been changed in a year or more. So if you go on a website, usually at the very bottom, if you scroll down to the end, you can find some kind of copyright date. And if it has the current year, or at least within the last 5 years, then I say that that's pretty good. But if you find one that hasn't been updated or hasn't given a copyright date for a good 6 or more years, then probably not a site that you want to be on. Favor web sources that document their claims over those that don't. So basically showing where their information came from, backing up their sources and whatnot. Then you want to make sure as you're getting this research, right, that you're developing focused knowledge, right? So in order to develop focused knowledge on your topic, you need to refine your search terms. Search terms are basically terms that you put into the databases that help you find the information. Know where that you're going to look for this useful information, and then use your time wisely. Ask yourself these 2 questions. Is this information relevant to my inquiry question? Meaning, what am I looking for? What kind of research am I doing to begin with? And does it change my question? So usually when we're doing research, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when you're doing research, you want to have questions. And so questions that you're asking help you build and find your research. And that's what that's referring to. Then, of course, always keeping the thesis in mind when you're doing your research. Are you suspending judgment? Are you testing assumptions? And then what are you doing? Are you looking to argue or to explore? It's the 2 ways in which we build our research. So here's just a little way in which we go about and why the research assignment is important.